However, my mother was like, why don't you give CLAT as a backup option? Reason being, you are an argumentative child, you like debating, you are good at speaking. That was her opinion. I don't know whether that's true or not. You don't know about a law firm, how will you get placed after 5 years? That time I was like, oh shit, I don't know anything. Let's learn more about the legal world. Law firms are not the place where I would want to be. So I thought, ये तो मुझे नहीं ही करना है. But then क्या करना है, right? MBA was not even on the radar. But then my wife, that time my girlfriend in college, she was like, hey, you have a logical bent of mind. You like to think about business and you do want to make decent money having a decent work-life balance, right? So why don't you give MBA a shot?
In the middle of those 5 years, you thought like, okay, MBA is something I can pursue. So you think like the ROI from like the law school was zero for you?
I would rate GNLU slightly above IIM in terms of the cohort I had.
Okay. So you've always been really focused on the culture.
A senior from college dropped a mail on the alumni group that hey, there's this company called Avenbox we are hiring for. We've grown very well in the past 4 years and we're looking for this sort of people. So I applied, I got through. And yeah, that is when that bent of HR also came into the play because it was an HR tech focused firm. So I thought, hey, this is a good opportunity.
Yeah.
I can eventually pivot into an HR role if you can try. I'll also get an exposure of how it works. At that point in time also I got this understanding that I do not like a desk job that much. I'd rather be moving around, talking to people, talking to newer people on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
There are times when I'm selling to my wife, right? Let's go on this trip. Why should you go on this trip? How much will it cost? What will you get out of it? What places will go? What food will eat? So you're technically selling. So first have been conditioned to think that you should have a linear career where you start working at the age of 25, grow, maybe retire as a CEO at the age of 55. I have had friends who have worked in a sector for let's say 10 years, totally pivoted, done totally something different for another 10 years, then something else for another 5 years. That is the mindset at least I approach it with, and I would recommend it to others also. See, being very honest, I do not see an MBA holding much value after 10 or 15 years down the line.
Yeah. Hi everyone, welcome to Wish I Knew That, a podcast where we dive into the topic of career outside law, navigating career pivots, and channelizing your inner curiosity. I'm your host Preeti. I previously graduated from Lady Shri Ram College, and post that I decided to pursue law from Jindal Global Law School. I previously have worked in dispute resolution and arbitration, and currently I work with a leading legal tech SaaS startup as part of the business and growth team. In our conversation, Himanshu talks about his time at GNLU and what prompted him to pursue MBA post that. Himanshu also shares his post MBA goals and how he was always on a lookout for a right culture in a professional realm. Both Himanshu and I also discuss B2B SaaS sales as a role and how you can break through that particular role if you're excited about it. So let's dive in today's episode. Hi Himanshu, welcome to Wish I Knew That.
Thank you, Preeti. Good morning. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah. Okay, so Himanshu, maybe for the benefit of our audience, like I have followed you like ever since I pivoted to a startup. But maybe for the benefit of our audience, we can talk about like you, where did you grow up, how early days like.
So I grew up in this hill station called Shimla till in my earlier days till class 6, then shifted to another beautiful hill station in Himachal called Dharamshala. That's where I grew up till class 12. Come from a family of entirely of doctors and teachers, not even a single lawyer in the family per se. Childhood was essentially, so if you know of Shimla, it involved a lot of walking to school. So it was like 5 kilometers daily through the mall road. So a lot of learnings of life, how to approach life in general, how to, be, I wouldn't call it being an extrovert, but, being upfront about how to approach things was learned from there. After class 12th, moved to this another beautiful state called Gujarat for my undergrad. So Gujarat National Law University. Was lucky enough to also do my MBA from there in Ahmedabad.
Yeah.
So spent close to 7 years in Gujarat. That's where also I found my wife, who was also my girlfriend in college.
Yeah.
And that's where we met. And that's how life has been since then.
Yeah. And when you were in school, like what prompted you to maybe pursue law as a career?
Interesting. It was more out of coincidence than active choice. So when I was in my class 11th and 12th, right, parents are like, these are the XYZ exams you need to give, or these are the papers you need to prepare for. I was a non-medical student in class 11th and 12th. So it was AIEEE then and engineering, IIT at that point in time. However, my mother was like, why don't you give CLAT as a backup option? Reason being, you are an argumentative child, you like debating, you are good at speaking. That was her opinion. I don't know whether that's true or not. So why don't you give this exam also as a backup? I hadn't actually prepared a lot for CLAT. As it like fate would have it, engineering exams didn't go that well. All my fault, I didn't study that much. CLAT went really well. I got a great rank and I got an admit in Gujarat National Law University. I was still keen that, hey, let's take another year, let's give it a shot, let's try for engineering again. But that was mainly because of, the influence from my surrounding circle of friends, etc., who were going into good engineering colleges. But my parents ended up convincing me and ended up joining GNLU. Turned out great for me. Had a ball for those 5 years in college.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about like what those 5 years were, what your learnings were during
Okay.
that time?
So the first 6 months were fairly clueless in terms of adjusting to the
Yeah,
hostel
I'm
life.
sure.
So people who are in the legal fraternity, they would know there are a couple of top Indian law firms called, at that time it was called Amarchand Mangaldas. Now it
Yeah.
is split into two. So one of my batchmates had their logo as the background of his desktop. He was that ambitious. Like, ये किसका logo है? कौन है? मतलब, why have you put this logo? He's like, you don't know about a law firm. How will you get placed after 5 years? That time I was like, oh shit, I don't know anything. Let's learn more about the legal world. So that was the first 6 months, 1 year. It was initial. So when you have 5 years, right? Unless you're a very studious student, studies are not a big focus in the initial few years, right? After that, you start worrying about your internships, your CV, and what you're going to do. So that's how law school started initially. Then figured out, interned in a couple of NGOs, interned with this Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry in Delhi. That time I got interested in intellectual property rights. I still am. So patents, trademarks, copyright, etc. That was that. Somewhere in my third, fourth year after interning in, let's say, a couple of law firms, I realized law firms are not the place where I would want to be. They have a very partner-driven culture. So if your partner is good, you can have a good time. If your partner is someone who's a micromanager or, a hard task, not a hard task master, but more of a toxic task master, it becomes difficult for you. I had seen seniors burning out or moving out within a couple of years. So I thought, ये तो मुझे नहीं ही करना है. But then क्या करना है, right? In life, one thing is, yeah, please.
So it was more of a cultural fit that you were looking. What about the work? Like, were you excited about the work?
To be honest, I say I wouldn't know. I was not excited about the work I was doing during internships, like research and all was fine. But in my mind, the exciting work would have been as a litigator.
Yeah.
But then I was also aware that having no one with a legal background in the family, it would have been life without a lot of money in the initial 5-7 years. And by a lot of money, I mean you were getting paid 20K or something in Delhi is difficult to survive on that amount of money, right? So I was like, okay, let's figure out what do we need to do. And that is when I, started thinking maybe in my third year or the end of the third year.
That you want to pursue an MBA?
Not an MBA, but what next? Could
What's
have been
next?
an LLM, could have been something else. So my parents were like, judiciary is an option. But then I realized life of judges are always under a lot of
Can
scrutiny.
you list like all the options that
Okay.
you thought like,
Absolutely.
is something I can pursue post-law?
So first was a law firm, a corporate law firm, make good money, work a lot, but eliminated first. Second was judiciary, eliminated again because being a judge is a lot of responsibility. I didn't think I am meant for that much responsibility, deciding about people's lives. LLM was another option, but that was primarily if you want to get into teaching, at least in India. MBA was not even on the radar, but then my wife, that time my girlfriend in college, she was like, hey, you have a logical bent of mind. You like to think about business and you do want to make decent money, having a decent work-life balance, right? So why don't you give MBA a shot? And at that point in time, I think in my fourth year, labor laws was a subject, industrial relations, and that is something I got interested about. So I thought, hey, life as a human resources professional post an MBA would be something I can give it a shot. And yeah, let's give it a try. Why not? That's how I thought I'll start preparing and then figure out.
And so in the middle of like, those 5 years, you thought like, okay, MBA is something I can pursue. So you think like the ROI from like the law school was zero for you?
To be honest, I never thought of the ROI, and I wouldn't. So if you think in like typical money terms, the fee I paid versus the sort of money I'll make once I'm in a job, then I never paid thought to that. But if you talk about the ROI in terms of the friends I made, the exposure I got,
qualitative ones.
how to approach life in general, how to stay away from home for the first time, how to talk to other people professionally, it was a great ROI. That's something I would have
I was actually referring to the qualitative aspects of it. So do you still think like those things that you learned during those 5 years were like really helpful when you eventually went for like an MBA?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I'm sure like there must be like other people as well from like due colleges and the engineering background. So how do you see yourself standing where like in that sort of cohort? Do you think a law graduate like really stands out the way they think about and the way they perceive like academics or any role in fact they want to pursue post MBA?
So see, one thing is you stand out just because of that degree, because out of a batch of 400, we were like two lawyers in the batch. The another
Yeah.
one was from GLC and there was I. So you get noticed everywhere, whether it's because in India there's a formal placement scenario, right? So whether it's a company which is shortlisting you for placements for an interview, or even in class, all the professors know you by face, even in a section of
Yeah.
90, because you have that
By virtue of diversity.
diversity unique tag on you. So
Yeah.
that happened with us. That happened with a few of the dentists and the doctors that were in the batch.
Mhm.
Apart from that, there were challenges. So, for example, if I talk about subjects which involved a lot of math,
Mhm.
so most of the B schools have a relative grading format, right? Where
Hmm.
you can score 98 out of 100, but if everyone else has scored 100
bell
on 100,
curve.
you're at
Yeah.
the fag end of the
Yeah.
bell curve. So statistics, probability, etc. were subjects where I struggled a lot. I was like, okay, मैं fail हो जाऊँगा, मैं क्या करूँ? पढ़ना पड़ेगा, and then somehow managed. However, there were other subjects like marketing or human resources, etc., which involved a lot of qualitative reasoning, not
Yeah.
getting into hard numbers. That is where we stood out, because we knew how to research, approach those subjects, how to write eloquently. All of that helped us a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's also because law school really trains
Correct.
you in that
Correct.
particular
Correct.
area.
Correct.
And in fact, like in one of my episodes, I remember someone was telling me, oh, I took law because I was not really great at math.
Yeah. I think like, my reason was sort of similar. I couldn't do really great at math, so I ended up being a lawyer.
Okay.
And that brings me to another point. So, at least in my state in Himachal, law is not really looked upon as like, in Himachal, you'll find everyone is either in the armed forces or in a government job or an engineer or a doctor. So, it was very difficult for me to also explain to my relatives that why am I doing law, but then I just let it be. Like,
And then how did you explain that now you're pursuing an MBA?
I didn't actually. I think the name of the college also helped, because everyone knew about it after.
Yeah. So when you were preparing for CAT, like you were fixated, okay, you know, IMA is something that I'm targeting, or ABC, or like there were other colleges as well that were on your radar.
So my top preferred colleges were XLRI and Tata Institute of Social Sciences, simply because I had that leaning towards HR.
Mhm.
I got through them. Fortunately, unfortunately, IMA happened, and
Yeah.
then still I wanted to go to Tata Institute, because if I think from a purely monetary perspective, also the fee there is really low compared to other B school colleges. It's
Mhm.
subsidized by the Tata Group, and job opportunities are as good as any of the other top colleges. However, everyone was fixated on that IMA tag, and they were like, "तुम कैसे
Yeah.
छोड़ सकते हो? ये कौन छोड़ता है?" Blah blah blah. I was like, "Okay, fine." So I had a great time there. I chose that eventually, and I would say I do not regret my choice at all.
Okay.
The only thing is I had to let go of that HR fixation for a while, and that was that.
Yeah. So, I mean, what was like the cohort at IMA vis-a-vis like GNLU? What do you think like are the differences, or you know, certain things that you liked more when you were at B school as opposed to law school?
Okay. So first things first, what I liked more about GNLU was there was much more gender diversity. So IMA was probably 90 girls out of a batch of 400. Then there was more diversity in terms of where the students came from also. At IMA, there were like 40 people from IIT Delhi, 40
Yeah.
people from IIT Kharagpur, more engineers from NITs, the top NITs,
Yeah, and
etc.
then like a whole bunch of due kids.
Yes, a whole
Yeah.
bunch of DU kids, BCom folks, CA folks,
Yeah.
chartered accountants, etc. GNLU was also better in the sense that people were fresh out of school, so they didn't have much of a fixed perspective on life. They were much more open to things.
Mhm.
A lot of folks at IMA were also like who had come after 1, 2, 3 years of being scarred by the industry of work, etc. So they were more set in terms of the ideas they had.
Yeah.
But that was not again like everyone. There was again enough diversity in the batch to go further with. The experience part also helped us learn, who were freshers
Yeah.
technically, who had not worked, that there are different ways to approach things. These are not just, because otherwise it is just bookish knowledge, right? We hadn't really worked.
Mhm.
So for us, it was also great learning from those people. So both had their pros, cons. But overall, if I have to tell about my life at college, I would rate GNLU slightly above IMA in terms of the cohort I had.
Also maybe because you were just like right after like school you joined that particular college and you made like some friends
Yes,
over
I also
there.
had much more free time, I would say.
All right. So when you were joining IMA, of course, you had this thing like about HR, like as a career you would want to pursue. But apart from that, were you also open to other careers? Or you were just like, okay, this is the post MBA goal I have in mind? Or you were also like, okay, let me do this another coveted course and think about it, like what I want to do in life?
See, when I chose IMA, it was fairly decided that HR is not going to happen because IMA has no like specialization in HR. There was no specialization at all, but there was no specific focus on HR. Neither were there a lot of job opportunities which were given in HR.
Mhm.
All of the companies used to go to an XLRI or TIS again for those roles or a Symbiosis for that matter. So it was fairly decided कि HR तो अभी नहीं होने वाला. Let's figure out what next. Consulting was the fancy thing to think about.
Yeah.
So, but unfortunately, again, consulting works on the same principle as a law firm, right? It's
Yeah.
very partner driven.
Yeah.
And I gave a couple of consulting interviews in my summer internship placements,
Mhm.
realized this is not for me. I can probably say this on record, not a problem. So, there was this interview I was having with this firm called AT Carney.
Mhm.
And in the second round of the interview, the partner really pissed me off. He was like, "Which college did you go to?" I was like, "GNLU." He was like, "Why? Weren't you good enough for getting into NLSCIU?" I was like, "Okay, what's your problem, man? You're supposed to be interviewing me, right? Not check my credentials, which are on my CV." So I just for fun asked him, "Which college did you go to?" So he said, "I am Lucknow." And I asked him why you were not good enough to get into Ahmedabad. So he got really pissed off after that, threw me out of the room, complained to my place com. But thankfully, my placement committee were nice. Like, who asked you to irritate the candidate? It's okay. Like, if you don't want him, you don't want him. So next day was FMCG companies, which are the again. So you do get influenced by the trends, right, which are happening in college, which were the next big trend if you wanted a proper exposure of how a business is run.
Yeah.
Interviewed with Nestle, got through in the first shot. I was
Mhm.
happy about it.
Mhm.
Got a pre-placement offer also after the interview. Sorry, after the internship. Worked there for another year.
Yeah.
Again, realized industry, company, everything is fine, but your boss needs to be nice.
Okay. So you've always been really focused on the culture.
I can't work with the. I wouldn't call them. Yeah, I can call them shitty people or bad people. You have to
Yeah.
be a nice person to work with me.
Yeah.
I may not like your work. You may not like my work, but as a person, I should be able to work with you. Otherwise, it's not happening for me.
Yeah. And at Nestle, like, what was your role?
So it was a management trainee, as you call it, but there
Mhm.
were like 1 year. So I worked on the brand KitKat for close to 8 months.
Mhm.
So if in Diwali 2017 you
And
had
that
any
was your
KitKat,
first job.
yeah, my first job.
So how did you like it? Like finally after like 7 years of studying, you're finally out there.
It was much more operational than actual brain work. So
Uh-huh.
when you're working on a brand, right, there are so many small things to worry about कि आप design change कर रहे हो तो the shade of that red color of KitKat branding should match the shade which has been approved by the brand. What sort of volumes you're pushing in Mumbai versus Hyderabad. All of those things matter a lot, which
Yeah.
is a fair bit of operational work. It is not marketing, right? The
Yeah.
actual marketing was only like 10-15% of it.
Okay. Even
So-
though your title says
Yeah.
that, but of
Yeah,
course,
yeah.
again, you're working on like operational stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All the time you have to coordinate with the factory because if you have to launch something on the 1st of October, the packaging should be at the factory by 15th of August.
Mhm.
So it was more of planning and operations than actual marketing.
Yeah. So is it sort of like a con? This is a con when you're working with an enterprise that you don't get to learn like the actual role you're hired for.
I wouldn't say that. It's actually a good thing because
Like
you
you
learn
go
those
through the grind.
Yeah, grind because later on when you're taking those strategic decisions, you are already aware of the operational pitfalls you can
Yeah.
have at a later
So
stage.
it's okay, and people should be okay with
Yes,
going through the
absolutely,
grind
absolutely,
in like their initial years.
absolutely.
All right. So Himanshu, I know we like discussed about how you wanted to go to, let's say, XLRI or TIS because you were focused on HR as an industry. So when you were finally at Nestle, did you like, and you were like, okay, you had like your fair amount of learning as well. That's when you decided that you want to pivot.
No, so that's when I decided I do not like my super boss and I can't foresee myself working here. And the super boss is a guy who I think will be the MD of Nestle India in the next 3-4 years. He's
Yeah.
great at his work, but he's not a great person to work
Yeah.
with. He's like a 18 hours a day wala workaholic kind of a person. They expected everyone to do that.
Hmm.
My only point was if I'm being paid as equal as everyone else, why should I work like twice more or 2.5 times more? It
Mhm.
doesn't. I'm doing a job because I want some money so I can enjoy the finer things in life, right?
Yeah.
I do
And
not
what
want
that would be for you, like.
anything just to have some free time to read. I'm into video gaming. It could be to travel. It could be to just sit and talk with friends. Anything it could be,
Yeah.
right? But when you're in office from like 8 in the morning till 9:30 in the night, you're not left with any energy to do anything. I was
Yeah.
like, ये तो मुझे नहीं चलेगा.
Hmm.
Let's figure out something. So one of my close friends from MBA, he had just set up a startup in the B2B SaaS space. It was
Mhm.
more catering towards recruitment needs of institutions in India. So I joined them,
Mhm.
worked there for a year. Unfortunately, didn't work out financially for the startup or for me either. And I
Mhm.
was about to get married then. तो थोड़ी जिम्मेदारी चाहिए थी कि क्या
Yeah.
करना है क्या नहीं करना है. That's when like a senior from college dropped a mail on the alumni group that hey, there's this company called Darwinbox we are hiring for. We have grown very well in the past 4 years, and we are looking for this sort of people.
Hmm.
So I applied, I got through, and yeah, that is when that bent of HR also came into the play, because it was an HR tech focused firm. So I
Yeah.
thought, hey, this is a good opportunity.
Yeah.
I can eventually pivot into an HR role if you can try. I'll also get an exposure of how it works,
Hmm.
because till now it's all an opinion in my head, right? I haven't experienced it. So that's how I ended up there and spent a good 4.5, 5 years there till December last
Do
year.
you want to talk about what exactly the space Darwinbox falls into for our
Sure.
audience?
Sure.
And also like your role at Darwinbox?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And also talk about like how Darwinbox, like what exactly the kind of TG it's catering to, and how your role was not really in HR, your role was very different. So maybe talk
Absolutely.
about that.
Absolutely. So essentially, Darwin. So explaining few things first. B2B is business to business. You're selling to other businesses or companies. SaaS is software as a service. You are not buying it outright. You're taking a subscription. The benefit of that is, as the product gets updated over time, you get direct access to it. You don't have to do any upgrades, etc. by yourself. Spend money on that. And while it may sound easy to you as an individual consumer, at an org level where it can impact 2,000, 5,000 people, it is not easy to change systems or upgrade systems over time.
Yeah. Change management is always
Absolutely.
difficult. Yeah.
Absolutely. And any company or business you think of, it needs three basic systems of record. One is for recording all of your financial transactions, which could be an accounting system.
Yeah.
Second is your CRM or your customer relationship management system, where all of your customers' data is.
Yeah.
Third is all of your employee data or people data, like
Yeah.
who are you hiring, what money or what amount of money has to be processed in the payroll each month, who took what leave, how is Preeti's performance this quarter or this year, etc. That is where Darwinbox fell into. So it was essentially selling a product to HRs, but which was going to be used by the entire organization. So that is where Darwinbox falls into. I'm sorry, you'll have to repeat the second question.
No, thanks for
Yeah.
explaining that. Second question is, what exactly was your role at Darwinbox?
It was core sales. So when I was in Nestle at that point in time, also I got this understanding that I do not like a desk job that much. I'd rather be moving around, talking to people, talking to newer people on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And I read more about how B2B sales works. Now, when I compare it to an FMCG sales, like in a Nestle, an FMCG, you're selling low value products to everyday consumers, like let's say a Kit Kat for $20 or a Silk for $80, etc. While in B2B, it is generally a transaction which could be 50 lakhs, 1 CR in revenue per annum, etc.
Yeah, people don't realize that B2B SaaS sales as a role is a very sophisticated role. It requires you to learn a lot of things, read a lot of things, interact with your users, and maybe also your tech side, like tech team as well, to understand the product in depth, because you're eventually at the day selling that product. I mean, you are selling it to HR. Let's say today in my role at SpotDraft, I'm selling it to lawyers. I really need to understand that product, because eventually you're not able to sell that product.
You better have in-depth
Yeah,
industry
I just
knowledge,
can't-
product
yeah.
knowledge, what the trends are. You need to know everything of that.
And you just can't like go, okay, these are the 10 features.
No,
like,
not at
you
all,
just
not at all.
can't do that.
It is never about feature selling. So when you're
Yeah.
selling to an enterprise, it's always about some problem or pain you're trying to solve,
Correct.
right? So in fact, if I go back how Darwinbox also started, I think one of the founders was doing a merger. He was an investment banker then, and he realized that there is no data which the acquiring entity could use to decide who to keep, who not to keep.
Yeah.
So having that core system of record or a source of truth for all of employees is where
Yeah.
it started. And my role was a core, you can call it an account executive, you can call it a salesperson. The idea is the first time someone expresses an interest that, hey, I want to look at Darwinbox. From that time till the time you close the conversation with them,
Yeah.
either they choose someone else or they choose you and they sign the contract.
Yeah.
That was my
Do you
role.
want to talk about like what sales as a role at a startup looks like? Of course, I can also add in, but like you said, like, okay, you started when someone actually showed an interest in buying the particular product or exploring the particular product, but there are a few steps before that as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it
Yeah.
also depends on the stage of the company you're at. So initially, it starts from something we call as prospecting, which
Yeah.
is like who is your target group of people, or
Yeah.
TG as
Or
you
you're
call
the
it.
ICP, like ideal, customer
persona.
profile. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like who is the ideal buyer? Okay, So someone who's maybe a head HR who has been there for a couple of years, wants some change, has a budget to spend on,
Yeah.
is well entrenched in the company because tomorrow CEO or a CFO will also need to approve those sorts of things. So
Yeah.
you start from building a database. These are the 100 companies I could target.
Did you do that?
No, we had a team by then to do it.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I didn't have to do it. But if you're an
Yeah.
early stage startup, even as a founder, you might have to do it.
Yes.
There are databases you can buy which are
SaaS
fairly
companies
accurate.
are in their initial days. I know it's all about founders led sales.
Absolutely.
And I think it really helps.
It
Like
does.
that's where you actually understand how to actually bring the prospect on the call.
True. And
Yeah.
initially, it is also more required because you, in the initial stages, it's more of a story than a robust product per se, right? You also
Yeah.
build your product with the initial 10,
Correct.
20, 30
You're just
customers.
selling your narrative.
Absolutely.
In like your early days. I mean,
Absolutely.
because I did like now that we have designated teams to help you with lead gen
Yeah,
or get you the
absolutely.
accounts and all of that. But I remember when I joined Sportdraft, of course, you fairly had some idea about B2B SaaS sales. I didn't even know what sales was, what targets are. I remember cold calling
Yep.
and getting rejected, and it felt like, oh my god, this is I was not prepared for that. And of course, you feel like, oh, I went to law school, I went to LSR, and this is what I'm doing. But I'm actually grateful for that because it has really helped me now when I'm actually an account executive
Yeah.
and when I'm selling. I know like what it takes to bring a prospect on the call, and every prospect needs to be taken seriously. So yeah,
I totally agree with that, and I'll take one point from that. See, rejection is something no one likes, right?
Yeah.
Like someone is saying to no to you. The only thing is, over time you have to realize they're not saying no to you; they're saying no to whatever you're trying to pitch to
Yeah.
them. So you have to be
and
impersonal
just
about
get
it.
like so comfortable hearing
Yeah.
a no. Like
Yeah.
now I'm so comfortable. I actually want someone to tell me no, I don't want this, so that I can move on.
In fact, in sales, it's also so after prospecting, you've identified someone, and let's say someone is showing interest. A very important stage is also qualification. How genuine is their interest,
Yeah.
and that is where you want the most no's to be
Hmm.
heard because you do not want to waste their time and your time in discussing something which is not going to work
Yeah.
out.
Do you want to talk about what this process looks like about qualification and all? Maybe for someone who is trying to like look for a sales as a next role post law school, maybe because this podcast would be viewed by
Absolutely,
lawyers who are
absolutely.
looking to build a career outside law. So
Absolutely. So qualification is essentially okay. There's no better explanation that you're qualifying someone that hey they have a
Ready to
need which
buy.
is good enough,
Yeah.
which could translate into a purchase for them tomorrow. It can use a lot. It can be a gut feeling. It can use a lot of their proper frameworks. A very basic one is something called as spin, which is like what is the situation, what is
Oh.
the pain, what is the impact, and can you fulfill that need,
Yeah.
etc. So there are many frameworks to do that. Over time, most account executives will fall into one or the other frameworks because it is easier to go by a checklist.
Yeah.
There are also basic frameworks like BAND, which is whether they have the
Yeah.
budget, they have the authority need, and is there a timeline? Do they want to do it in the next 3 months or 3 years? So if it is 3 years, you'll probably nurture them now and not go very hard on them कि अभी ले लो type से अभी ये best चीज है आपके लिए. So that is essentially what the qualification process
Yeah.
is, and it's very important that so if you're talking to let's say 20 customers in one go, it doesn't get very bloated and you waste time and opportunities which are not going to really add any value to the
Correct.
company.
So I think people should be like open to the subjectivity coming into place.
Absolutely. That is something you also learn after you are in a specific company or sector for a year or so. You figure out over time.
And for you it helped, right? Because you were interested in HR, you knew like
Absolutely.
what that team would look like, the dynamics, and how people think and just
Yeah.
interact, their language. Basically, you were speaking their language, so it just helped. So Himanshi, we spoke about like qualifying a particular lead. Then what are the next steps we are looking at?
So once someone is qualified in the sense that they have a need which we can serve, you essentially run through an evaluation process which can vary from customer to customer. So some of the very big companies, you'll hear of this term called an RFP, which is a request for
Yeah.
proposal. They'll document all their needs. They'll give it to you. They'll want a documented response. These days, actual product demos are very, very helpful because you have, video conferencing, etc. for the past 7-8 years. So
Yeah.
you get on a call or you go to their office, do it in a conference room,
Mm.
you demonstrate what you're saying,
entire-
you actually show it, right? Seeing is
Mm.
believing, I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
As a salesperson, it is also very important that point in time to be, so what we were taught were you have to be a champion for the customer first before being a champion for your product, right? They need to feel and understand that hey, you're actually there to solve their need and not just pushing them ki, hey, take this, pay this money, and then you
Yeah.
disappear. That is not how it works. So that is the next step after qualification. It can involve I've seen deals which took a month for evaluation. I've seen deals which took a year for evaluation. Also,
Yeah.
totally depends. A lot of things can happen. Some key stakeholders at the customer may change. They may have different priorities.
Yeah.
Things may change in your product, so you no longer serve their needs, or you serve their needs better than what you
Yeah.
expected. Some new competitor might come in with a better offering. So all of those things can happen.
Yeah.
But it eventually involves like the customer is giving you, hey, these are my problems. How you solve them? Show it to me how you solve them. And max to max, you could do a POC or a proof of concept that, hey, we'll set up a small thing for you. You try it out for yourself. It's like a trial, and then you see how it works for you.
You know, as we talk more about this as a role, you know, I feel like there are certain like valuable things that come out. Like, you are not just like selling to that particular person, you are actually educating them.
Absolutely.
You are collaborating internally as well, because if they have any concern or query, you are going back to your product team,
Absolutely.
asking for that, then taking that feedback, coming back to them and telling them.
Yeah.
It's just like a lot of collaboration, educating, and of course you also learning on. It's a very dynamic role at the end of the day. So why do you think, like, in India, like, because I know this, when I told my mom I'm going to do sales, she was like, what is this demotion in life? What,
Understood.
like, do you think this was also the conversation you've had with your maybe partner or your parents? And how, like, do you think like sales as a role is perceived well in India?
So I'll answer the first question first. So my partner and my parents, they didn't really care. They're like, as long as you're doing something in life and you're getting paid, whatever makes you comfortable, it's okay. Like,
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Sales is looked down upon in India because generally the perception of sales is like sleazy people who'll try to push stuff onto you, right? Let's say what probably, and I think it is also from people's experiences, because in their mind a salesperson would be a car salesperson or someone who's selling them a flat in a metro city. Just
Yeah,
like, sir,
nothing
यही
wrong
बेस्ट है,
with
ये आप
that.
ले लो,
Yeah.
इससे अच्छा कुछ नहीं मिलेगा मार्केट
Yeah.
में, मैं आपको बता रहा हूँ, that sort of a mentality. Conversely, if you compare it with the Western world, right, let's say the US or Europe, you'll find the smartest people in sales because
Yeah.
they understand that, hey, you can control your time and you can make a lot of money out of it. And in the end, that is what is of importance to them. So you'll find the smartest people being in sales.
Yeah.
India, I think it is slowly changing now, especially with the advent of the SaaS industry. Unfortunately, sales, I don't have a very high opinion of sales people still in certain industries such as banking and FMCG,
Mhm.
because they're very numbers driven and people can get very crazy and toxic even over a 1% miss in target, etc. B2B sales is much more forgiving,
Yeah.
I feel, in that sense, because B2B sales values the customer relationship much more over just the number that you're hitting.
Yeah. The idea of consultative selling is
Yes.
actually being incorporated in this particular
Yes,
sector.
absolutely, absolutely.
So that's something you feel is changing in the SaaS
It
industry.
has
per se.
changed already. We focus
Yeah.
not just on customer relationships, but
Yeah.
also about people relationships,
Yeah.
right? So once CHRO is sold to a client X, after 3 years moved to another client Y, she just gave me a call, hey, I want Darwin
Yeah.
Box, share the contract, share the pricing, I've already seen it, I've used it. So
Yeah.
those sort of things matter. Had I been a bad salesperson to her in the first company, she would have never even thought of calling me that.
Yeah.
So those things matter. And those things are also changing how people approach sales, at least in the B2B space.
I was listening to Guy Raz's podcast. Like,
Sorry, whose podcast?
Guy Raz's podcast.
I have no
He's
clue.
a podcaster in West, and he was actually talking about like how everyone should do sales as a role at least once in their life, because you learn to like hear a lot of no's. You learn like what it takes to actually sell your product, and if you have that to get that founder mindset, sales as a role is very important.
I totally agree. And in fact, thanks for bringing up that point. In any industry, if you're in the private sector, even in the government sector, you're eventually selling something, right? So maybe in a law firm or in a consulting firm, not initially, but once you make a partner or a principal, your job is to get business, right? So
Yeah.
their associates can work on it. And even if I remove the getting business part, in the end, there are times when I'm selling to my wife, right? Let's go on this trip. Why should you go on this trip? How much will it cost? What will you get out of it? What places will go? What food will eat? So you're technically selling. Even if you're a small kid, you're convincing your mother to buy you a PlayStation. You're selling to her, right? That I
Yeah.
need it because my friends have it. I need to spend some time. So you're eventually selling at all points in life. You're convincing someone.
Yeah.
So why not do it formally and then
Yeah.
make a career out of
Yeah.
it?
And do you think sales as a role is a very high impact role in an organization, particularly in a startup?
See, unashamed answer would be yes, definitely. It is the most high impact role. Product people will say, ki, hey, we made the product. What will you sell? But eventually, it is us who are getting the revenue, right? We are bringing the bread and butter for everyone else to consume. I say it is the most high impact role.
Okay. And what about like customer success as a role?
Again, it's a very high. I'll call every role as a high impact role, right?
As
It
long
depends
as
on
it's
the
the
journey, the
revenue.
stage, the stage of the customer journey, right? Once I've sold, it's being implemented. After that, customer success is very, very important. I'll probably talk to the client once in 3 months or 2 months.
Mhm.
They are talking to the client on a weekly basis. They need
Mhm.
to be very, very good at making the customer successful, right?
But that's nice. Like to sum up everything that we discussed, I feel like sales as a role just teaches you to like analyze your competitive landscape, how
Absolutely.
you want to collaborate internally. Like, of course, you have to build a rapport initially with your team members as well,
Yes.
so
Yes.
that they are also responding you on
Yes.
time. Tomorrow, your customer, like if you're working with an enterprise, they want a referral. You need to develop a good relationship with your
Absolutely.
customer success team so that they can get you a referral.
Absolutely.
And again, like just with like implementation team and support team, if you want to set up like a POC, it's just so important that you learn how to collaborate with them, build a rapport,
Yeah.
not just with your prospect, but within your team as well, because it's all these elements that come together for eventually that sale
It takes
to
an
go
army
through.
to make that
Really,
sale. Yes,
that's true.
absolutely. You're just probably the orchestra conductor ki ye karna hai, but karwana is not that easy.
Yeah, and we spoke about this like sales as a high impact role. It is, it looks on it, but it really takes a lot of
Yes.
effort internally as well to like, make sure that we close that particular deal like during that particular quarter. So, yeah, I mean,
So if I add on to that, essentially you're selling, you're not just collaborating, you're selling to team internally also, right? Because everyone has their priorities and you have to make them understand why what I'm asking you to do is more important than what you're doing currently.
yeah.
Right? So in the end, everyone cares about their achievements, their KRAs, KPIs.
Yeah.
So you have to align with them.
Exactly.
So
So
it's
you're
a rapport
selling
plus
all the time.
internal selling, yes, both of them.
You're selling internally, you're selling to the prospect. One more thing I want to ask you about is can anybody do this particular role, sales as a role?
I think, yeah, anyone can sell. I think that's what that guy, what's his name? Jordan Belfort, right? The Wolf of Wall Street guy. That's what he
Yeah.
also said. Yes, anyone can sell. But it might require more training for some people. Some might be more natural at it.
Mm-hmm.
So in our country, at least, people value money more over time. So if I compare it with the Western market, in the US, you tell someone that, hey, my product is going to make operations more efficient for you. They'll lap it up like that. Okay, wow, that's a great thing.
Hmm.
In India, they'll be like, I'll put 3 more people on it. They can do it. No, why should I
Yeah.
buy a product to do it? What they don't understand is those 3 people will not work 24/7 without any errors, etc. So that cultural nuance is there. And because of that, there are certain people who might need to develop certain skills depending on the cultural context you are in. So in India, small talk, rapport building, maybe sitting with the promoter of a company and having just chai samosa without any meaningful conversation for an hour, things like that matter.
Yeah.
And what I've seen is people love talking about themselves. So you should be good at making people talk about themselves.
Yeah.
And it should be natural that, hey, what about your family? What's your son's name or daughter's name? What does that name mean? So there were times when I was aware that, hey, this client's son has a cricket class at 5 in the evening. So if I'm calling her at 6, I'm like, hey, how's Virat's cricket coaching class going? So things like that, certain competencies, building a relationship, being logical, a bit analytical, not very quantitative, those things, either they come naturally or you can build those things over
Yeah.
time. Doesn't take more than a year or 2 years max.
Yeah.
That is why you'll see in most SaaS companies, you start off as a sales development rep,
Yes.
where you're just prospecting, qualifying, cold calling people. So you
Yeah.
get through those initial
Yep.
stages, then you can start selling full time.
Yeah. I mean, this is exactly how I started.
The only addition to that is if you're looking for a career in sales, also focus on the industry and the company you are choosing.
Mm-hmm.
So you shouldn't be choosing an industry which is degrowing or a product which is not that great. So maybe it's not easy for you if you're doing it at an entry level, but at least get a basic hang of the product even before you decide that, hey, I'm joining this company, right?
Yeah.
As a salesperson, a great salesperson, people think a great salesperson is someone who can sell even the worst product to a
Yeah.
customer. That is not the case. The product also needs to back up your claims.
Yeah.
So that is something, research on the industry, research on the product also
Yes.
before you end up deciding that, hey, this is what
Yes.
I want to do.
And as we talk, I see like there's a pattern of both of us pivoting to B2B SaaS sales because you were excited about HR space, you knew the space, you spoke the language. And similarly for me, I sort of understood like the legal industry. Before even joining the company, what made me sort of join that company was because I understood the product at a certain level to maybe even strike a conversation. Like
Absolutely.
even like, someone who's interviewing me, they know like, oh, I've read something, I understand it, I can speak the language. And I should be able to present a true picture
Correct.
to the prospect. Before we like close this session, I just want to talk about like, did you get a chance to see a recent LinkedIn post where a guy sort of proposed his girlfriend and
Yeah.
then posted on LinkedIn about it and connect it that to B2B SaaS sales?
So this is something I've seen on LinkedIn for the past 3-4 years. People will connect any random thing to corporate gyan. Earlier, I think it started with Ola Uber drivers, the sort of gyan they got in cabs. Then it pivoted to Swiggy Instamart, poor delivery drivers. Now it's anything and everything under the sun. I personally use LinkedIn a lot because in my job I need to know who's occupying what position in what company. But as a career or a job oriented social media platform has just become full of a lot of cringe. Like, why will you post a picture of you vacationing in Sri Lanka while you're giving some gyan about, I don't know, some corporate stuff? Like, I don't know what's happening. But unfortunately, the way I think the LinkedIn algo works or how people end up spreading the content, this sort of content has become very invasive throughout LinkedIn. In addition to all those finance influencers you would have seen, right?
Yeah.
I don't know whether they're right or wrong, but back in January that, hey, I've quit my last job, I know break for a while, reach out to me for ABCD. There were people who wrote CFBR. I don't know why did they write that. Like, I didn't even know them, but yeah, that happened. But yeah, unfortunately, that's what people say now.
Another thing
that,
is like,
yeah.
oh, I created this XYZ cheat sheet. Like,
Comment.
put your email or something.
I think that's just playing with around with the algorithm so that more likes and comments come on your post, more people see it.
Yeah.
I think overall the economy is moving in that sense, right? Where a lot of individual freelancers want to become content creators, whether it is YouTube, Instagram, or LinkedIn. And yeah, they've just monopolized LinkedIn in that sense.
But what kind of content would you like to consume on LinkedIn? I know, like in our jobs, we really have to be on LinkedIn out there.
Yeah.
But when you are scrolling through it just for your own personal consumption, what is it that you would want to consume? Not maybe gyan, because of course, like there's too much happening. But
For me, the content I actually consume today is a lot of sales related gyan I consume. And then second is more about awareness in terms of what is happening around the world. These are only the two. So people do reach out all the time. Anyone who's in a law school wants to think of an MBA or is thinking of an MBA there.
yeah, I,
More
just
than
before
welcome
we
to reach
wind
out.
this up,
Yeah.
do you think like pivoting to a startup or pivoting to any business oriented role, you necessarily need an MBA?
Not in today's date and age, but
Yeah.
you should be willing to probably start as a lowly paid intern for a 4, 5, 6 months period and
Yeah.
then
And that's
move
okay.
on to a role. That's okay if
That's
that's
okay,
with
right.
you. The only thing is you'll get these opportunities more in startups than in established companies because again, as I said in the beginning, in India there's a formal placements driven
Yeah.
culture when you come to
Which
more
is not in
established
the West.
companies.
Like
It's not in the
it's
West.
totally driven on how you make your connections in West and the networking that you do and just build your own relationships
Correct.
to sort of like get those opportunities. But you're like saying like if you want to work with a startup, these opportunities can be fairly easy if you are
Yes.
like following the right steps.
You just need to research. See, everything is on the internet. You just need to be good at researching, which I believe most law school students are any which way. You just need to figure out these are the 5-10 startups I can target. Just offer them your services. Say I have this XYZ skill. Why not start in this role? And I've seen people do that. I totally agree. And see, the fact is, most of us have been conditioned to think that you should have a linear career where you start working at the age of 25, grow,
Yeah.
maybe retire as a CEO at the age of 55. I have had friends who have worked in a sector for, let's say, 10 years, totally pivoted, done totally something different for another 10 years, then something else for another 5 years. That is the mindset, at least I approach it with, and I would recommend it to others also. See, being very honest, I do not see an MBA holding much value after 10 or 15 years down the line.
Yeah.
Because in the end it's not a hardcore skill, right? It is more about how you approach things. It's not an engineering degree or a doctor's degree or a lawyer's degree. I don't think honestly an MBA is required if you want to break into the business world, because what you learn on the job in a couple of years, you'll learn much more than what you learn in an MBA degree.
Yeah.
In India, at least for me or for others also, going to a top B school is a sort of getting a validation that hey, this person is at least this good, so if we hire him or her, they'll do something for the company.
Yeah.
Which you don't really need to do. You can just start working out and move yourself up the ladder. That's how it can work.
As you said, it's easier to maybe then pivot to a startup as opposed to maybe an established enterprise or organization.
Yeah.
So, I mean, of course, there are some trade-offs, but like you have to begin somewhere.
Absolutely.
And it's better to start somewhere rather than wait for that perfect opportunity. Like you have to create your own opportunities. No opportunities gonna come to your way asking, oh, now this is a perfect job for you, apply for it.
No, I'll be honest. So even in my case, I'm sitting here today. It was always like there was something going on in my mind. I wasn't actively looking, but then some opportunity came. I was like, let's give it a shot. Works out well. Doesn't work out.
Yeah, just being open to certain
Absolutely.
things.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Himanshu. This
You're
was
welcome.
great.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah.